The Browns have made a pair of signings this morning. First, Jameis Winston to be the backup quarterback, and then they finally added a running back, Nyheim Hines. So we're going to talk about both these signings. We'll go in chronological order. We'll talk about the Jameis Winston signing first, and then we'll talk about Nyheim Hines. So let's talk about the backup quarterback that's got everyone super worked up because rumors came out last night that the Browns were interested in Jameis Winston, and ultimately Andrew Berry pulled the trigger this morning, and I'm somewhat grateful to him for not doing it at 12:15, 1:15 in the morning like Sam Darnold to the Vikings did, but Jameis Winston's got this fan base split, because on one hand, there were lots of rumors about Joe Flacco coming back, and the Browns sounded open to a Flacco returning, and ultimately the Patriots did not sign Flacco like a lot of us thought they would, and they went with Jacoby Brissett, which freed up Flacco, right? But the Browns decided to pivot, I suppose, and they went with Jameis Winston. Now, when it comes to Jameis being a backup quarterback, for all 32 teams, I think Jameis would be a great backup quarterback. He's got plenty of playing experience. He is well-liked and loved in the locker room, so it's not going to be some distraction or anything like that. He can help the starter prepare. He's been around the league for quite some time. I think Jameis Winston as a backup quarterback is a very good backup. I mean, the guy in 2019 led the NFL in passing with 5,100 yards, 33 touchdowns, but also 30 interceptions. And that 30 interceptions does have a few of you really hung up on that, thinking, well, why do we want a backup quarterback that's going to throw a ton of picks? Do I need to remind you that Joe Flacco threw some interceptions last season? I like Joe. I wanted Joe Flacco back, but let's not act like Joe Flacco also didn't push the ball down the field, take some risk, which sometimes paid off, but also sometimes were interceptions. So I think there are some similarities between Flacco and Jameis Winston. I mean, they're not, apples to apples styles of quarterback, but they do have some gunslinger mentality in them. So you're not going very far from the Joe Flacco tree. But Jameis Winston as a backup quarterback, I can get behind. I can get with. If something happens to Deshaun Watson, you can feel confident that Jameis Winston, with plenty of experience, former first overall pick in the draft, can step in, hold down the fort for a quarter, a half, a week, a month. I'm much more confident in Jameis Winston in that role than probably a Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And it always felt like the Browns were going to go after a veteran backup QB because themselves and hopefully every other team in the NFL last season learned the lesson of you need to have a good backup quarterback. One in every two teams at some point will go to their backup quarterback, it feels like, every single year. And you hope it's not you, but I think you're naive if you don't think it could be you. There are some quarterbacks who naturally just are Ironmen and they just never seem to miss a game, miss a snap. So for those teams, they probably don't need to pursue it so much. But for the Browns, I think they should have learned the lesson of the last few seasons of we should invest wisely into the backup QB position, which I think is reflected with a one-year deal worth up to $8.7 million. I mean, that's not just chump change, $1.87 million. That's a good investment in a backup quarterback. Now, I do kind of wonder, as I go kind of full conspiracy mode here for a second, the Browns said they wanted to bring Joe Flacco back. Of course, there are constraints and whatnot, and nothing's a guarantee. But Joe Flacco said he wanted to come back. But ultimately, if a place offered him a spot to compete for the starting job, he would go there. And maybe that's going to happen. But what happened? Were the Browns kind of full of shit the whole time when they said they wanted to bring Flacco back? Because once Jacoby Brissett went to New England, felt like that was the number one destination for Flacco to reunite with Alex Van Pelt. And now he's still on the market, and the Browns decided to go with Jameis instead. Kind of makes you wonder, were the Browns just saying all that back in January to get some brownie points with the media and the fan base after Joe Flacco almost was about to win the NFL Comeback Player of the Year award a few weeks later? Or did they not want to bring Flacco back because they did not want to have a circus of Ohio State after the national championship game? Who's your starting quarterback, right? Do they want it to be clear-cut, no question about it? It's Deshaun Watson. And they didn't want an elephant in the room of if Watson doesn't start playing well, are people in the locker room going to ask for Joe Flacco to go back out there after the way he played last season? You should do what's best for the team, but I also wonder if the Browns maybe cater to Deshaun Watson just a little bit, going, yeah, it might be a bit awkward if Flacco is in there. I want to believe that they're all adults, they're all big boys, and it wouldn't get to that point. But I'm curious what happened with Flacco. It went from we'd love to have him back to free agency's here. No one signed him, and you went after Jameis instead. What changed? If I could sit down with Andrew Berry, that would be one of the big questions I'd ask him. But grade the Jameis Winston signing for me. A, B, C, D, or F. Chime in for me down below in the comment section how you would grade the signing. Guys, let's not get overly passionate about it. I know a backup quarterback is important if you need to go to him, but it's also a 1 in 2 chance. They may very well never see Jameis play a single snap for this team. And fingers crossed we never see him do play a snap unless it's victory formation in a blowout. So I'll give it a B- signing, B signing. I mean, I don't think you can be too emotional or too polarizing when it comes to the backup QB signing. And that's just Cleveland Browns fans for you. They get worked up over the backup quarterback signing because this is a fan base that has seen the backup quarterback play maybe more than the starter in some seasons. Now, we're going to talk about Nyheim Hines next up on the show. But really quickly, we are going to be going live for NFL free agency. I said 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We actually started filming this video. Then the Nyheim Hines news broke, so we had to stop filming and restart. So make sure you are joining us for our free agency coverage, which will be live on the channel around 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Maybe pushed back by a few minutes if we need some extra time to get ready. Now, let's talk about Nyheim Hines, who comes over on a 1-year deal worth up to $3.5 million. We were all waiting for the Browns to make an addition at the running back position, and now they do, and it's Nyheim Hines, who did not play last season. He got in a boating accident over the summer, missed the entire 2023 season. Before that, he was with the Colts for half a year after being traded from Buffalo, which is where he played under Ken Dorsey. So you can see some connections right there between Hines, Ken Dorsey. Dorsey utilizing him as a scat back, a receiving running back, not just an in-between the tackles kind of player, which really complements Nick Chubb well, since that's what Chubb does better than anyone else, in between the tackles. Maybe not the best receiving back in the league, but there was no question in my mind the Browns had to bring in another running back, right? They could not simply hand the job to Jerome Ford for the first half of the season if Nick Chubb ends up missing that much time. They needed to have some sort of other running back introduced so that it's not just the Jerome Ford show, because I don't really want to watch that show for the first 8 weeks of the season after last year. Now, as for Nyheim Hines as a player and the overall addition, it's not the big-ish signing I was looking for, but the running back market is explosive right now. Like, I thought the Browns could get DeAndre Swift on a 1-year, $5-6 million deal. He ends up going for $8 million a season to the Chicago Bears. Same for Tony Pollard. Austin Eckler, 2-year, $11.5 million. The Browns were not going to find a running back to their liking for under $5 million for those top-tier guys, so they settle. And this is a roll of the dice by Andrew Berry, right? He is making a decision, and a risky-ish one too, that Nyheim Hines and Jerome Ford can get the job done until Nick Chubb returns. And they hope it's not going to be a long time, because Jerome Ford and Nyheim Hines, if they're the 1-2 back for most of the season, it's not going to be a whole lot different than last year. Now, an upside with Hines is he offers you some special teams value. He took the opening kickoff back in the playoff game between the Bills and the Patriots a few years ago, if you guys remember that. He's got plenty of special teams pedigree, so it's definitely a boost in that department. He can kind of fill a couple of roles for your team, but I felt like the Browns should have gone a little bit bigger at running back. Felt like they should have gone after a guy that can really lead the backfield and hold down the fort until Nick Chubb returns. Not a player that pairs nicely with Jerome Ford like a barefoot wine would. Like, I wanted something a little bit nicer, right? And it didn't feel like that was the signing here. So, fingers crossed Nick Chubb does not miss a lot of time, because if he does, I feel like this ground game is not going to be very far off from where it ended last year, which was pulling teeth at stretches. So let me know, do you like the running back signing? I'm personally, this is one of those moments where, despite being one of the biggest Andrew Berry fans out there, I am questioning this decision. I am wondering if the Browns are getting a little bit ballsy here with, let's go super cheap at running back and let's just hope Nick Chubb comes back soon. The guy got surgery in November. He may miss 12 months. Can you roll with Jerome Ford and Nyheim Hines for September and October and into November? We're talking half the season. If Nick Chubb comes back after missing the first 3 or 4 weeks, all right, yeah, we can make do with Ford and Hines for a month or so. But what if it's longer? This might be something the Browns look back at and go, maybe we should have ponied up a little bit more for a real running back. Well, we're going to have live free agency coverage coming your way in just a little bit here. But let's wrap up the show by picking a card, Smitty. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds good to me.
We got Tyler Smith on the 1s and 2s today, kind enough to join the Browns report for the afternoon. What do you want to go with?
I'm going to go something very simple here. Give me the 4 of diamonds.
4 of diamonds?
Yeah.
I like it. I'm going to go with the 2 of spades for 2 signings.
Nice.
Sound good? That sound good? All right,
Here
we go.
Brownies.
5 of spades.
Oh.
5 of spades. All right. That will do it for us on this edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. Jameis Winston, Nyheim Hines, they come over in backup roles, and Andrew Berry, I think as we've learned over the last couple of years, is not quite the big spender in free agency as we may feel he is for how blockbuster he is. He loves to make trades. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another trade go down. But when it comes to free agency, he doesn't usually shell out big bucks in that department. So I hope he didn't have too high of hopes for a Christian Wilkins or a like Derrick Henry or one of the other big running backs, because that was likely never really going to be in play, especially when the running back market broke out the way it did.